Your mind is powerful, but it's not always accurate. It can create stories based on fear, past trauma, insecurity, or even someone else's opinion that you've accepted as your own. Just because a thought enters your head doesn't mean it deserves your belief. Not every thought is a fact. Sometimes it's just a reflection of an old wound that hasn't healed yet, or a false narrative you've repeated too many times. We often confuse our thoughts with our identity. We say, I'm not good enough, and believe it's who we are, instead of recognizing it as a passing mental event. Thoughts are like clouds. Some are dark, some are light, but none of them stay forever unless we hold on to them. When you take every thought seriously, you give power to lies and limit the possibility of truth taking root. Your brain is designed to protect you, not always to empower you. That means it leans toward caution, exaggeration, and worst-case scenarios. When you assume the worst will happen, your mind is trying to shield you, not sabotage you. But if you don't challenge it, that protective instinct becomes a cage. It tells you to stay safe, to stay small, to stay hidden. And none of those places lead to growth. The problem starts when you accept every internal voice as gospel. You think you're lazy because you missed one goal. You think you're broken because someone walked away. You think you're incapable because you failed once. These aren't truths. These are reactions. The truth lives deeper. It lives in action, in effort, in what you're building, not what you're thinking in your lowest moments. Negative thoughts scream louder than positive ones because pain demands attention, but that doesn't make them more accurate. A loud lie is still a lie. You have to learn to observe your thoughts without obeying them. Not every thought deserves a seat at your table. Some deserve to be challenged, replaced, and evicted. Awareness is your first weapon. The moment you realize you're thinking something destructive, you create distance between you and the thought. That distance is power. In that space, you get to decide, will I believe this or will I question it? Will I react or will I redirect? That decision is where mental strength is built. You were never meant to be a prisoner of your mind. You were meant to be the master of it. But mastery takes awareness, discipline, and repetition. The more you question your thoughts, the more power you take back. The more you speak truth over lies, the more clarity you create, and clarity kills confusion. Every great transformation starts with this realization. You don't have to believe everything you think. You can think scared and still be brave. You can think doubtful and still take the step. You can think negative and still choose a different direction. Because thought is not destiny unless you make it so. Negativity is not something you were born with. It's something you picked up over time. It was shaped by your environment, your influences, your experiences, and the voices around you. If you grew up hearing criticism more than encouragement, doubt more than belief, you started to repeat those patterns in your own mind. Over time, negativity became familiar, automatic, almost invisible. But just because it feels natural doesn't mean it's permanent. Like any habit, negativity grows through repetition. The more you complain, the more reasons your mind finds to complain. The more you focus on what's missing, the harder it becomes to see what's working. Negativity builds momentum the same way success does, by feeding it consistently. And most people don't even realize they're feeding it. It becomes their default setting, their emotional reflex, their first response to challenge. Negativity shows up in subtle ways. It's the voice that says, this won't work, before you've even tried. It's the hesitation before an opportunity, the doubt before the decision, the criticism after every effort. And the more you listen, the more it shapes how you see the world. You start seeing obstacles instead of options, threats instead of chances, and problems instead of possibilities. You don't notice you're wearing a filter. You just think that's reality. But here's the truth. Negativity is not your fate. It's just a pattern. And patterns can be broken. You can interrupt the loop. You can retrain your brain to focus on what builds you instead of what breaks you. It starts with awareness, catching the thought before it runs wild, recognizing when your mindset is sliding, and refusing to let it control your next move. You don't need to erase the thought, you need to redirect it. Unlearning negativity doesn't happen overnight. You've spent years building this habit, so it takes time to reverse it. But every time you choose gratitude over complaining, progress over perfection, courage over doubt, you weaken the grip of that mindset. And the more you do it, the more natural it becomes. That's how you replace a destructive habit with a powerful one. Consistency over time. You have to be intentional. Feed your mind like you feed your body, daily, consciously, and with discipline. What you consume mentally is shaping your mood, your focus, your future. If you surround yourself with people who see the worst, speak the worst, and expect the worst, don't be surprised when your mindset sinks with them. You can't build a positive life with a negative lens. Negativity loves comfort. It loves when you stay in the same place, complain about the same problems, and make excuses instead of moves. But growth requires resistance. You have to challenge the inner voice that tells you to give up, to settle, to stop dreaming. That voice will always be there, but you can get louder. You can speak life louder than fear. You can speak vision louder than limits. You weren't born negative, you were conditioned. And anything that was learned can be unlearned. You don't have to carry the same mindset forever. You don't have to be a victim of your thoughts. You have the power to build new patterns, to create a new inner dialogue, to see the world through strength instead of struggle. Fear and doubt have a way of showing up right before everything changes. They whisper the loudest when you're on the edge of something greater, when you're about to step into unknown territory. That resistance you feel isn't a warning to stop. It's a signal that you're moving beyond the limits of your old self. Fear doesn't visit the comfortable, it visits the courageous. It shows up to test your readiness, not to predict your failure. Breakthrough doesn't feel like a celebration when it's happening. It feels like pressure, like confusion, like fear trying to drag you back to safety. The discomfort you feel when you're leveling up is not danger, it's growth. But too many people mistake that resistance for reality. They think because it feels uncertain, it must be wrong. They turn around right before the breakthrough, never realizing how close they were to the shift. Doubt is not a prophecy, it's a pattern. It's your mind's attempt to protect you by avoiding risk. But protection and progress rarely live in the same space. The mind that's trained by fear will always try to shrink your future to the size of your past. It will offer you comfort when you should be chasing challenge. It will whisper what if scenarios designed to keep you in place. But growth is always uncomfortable, always unfamiliar, always resisted. You can't let the volume of fear fool you into submission. The voice gets louder the closer you get to change. The anxiety increases not because you're weak, but because you're strong enough to face something new. Fear is loud, but it's not wise. Doubt is intense, but it's not truth. You have to learn to hear those voices without letting them guide you. You acknowledge them without obeying them. Every time you break through, it feels like chaos before clarity. You'll question your timing, your talent, your worth. You'll wonder if you're fooling yourself, if you're too late, if you're not built for it. But none of that is proof you're failing. It's proof you're stretching. The most powerful transformations often begin with the deepest internal conflict. That's not a curse, that's confirmation. Breakthrough requires you to push through the fog of uncertainty. It asks you to keep moving when it doesn't make sense, to trust the process when you don't see results, to bet on yourself when everything inside you is shaking. It's not a lack of fear that creates greatness, it's moving through it. And you don't need to be fearless to succeed. You just need to be faithful to the mission. Your future will always provoke resistance from your past. The stronger your vision, the stronger the opposition. That tension isn't telling you to stop, it's telling you to break through. It's telling you this is the moment where most people quit, where most people retreat, where most people listen to fear and build their life around it. But you are not most people. You weren't built to retreat, you were built to rise. What you're feeling isn't failure, it's friction. Friction that means you're moving, friction that means you're transforming, friction that means the old you is being stretched into someone new. That resistance doesn't mean turn back, it means lean in, doubt the doubt, fear the comfort, walk through the noise, and claim what's on the other side. Your mind is a garden, and every thought you entertain is a seed. Some seeds grow weeds, some grow trees, but what determines the harvest is what you water. Feed fear with your focus, and it multiplies until it takes over the landscape of your life. Feed faith with your attention, and it expands, pushing out the weeds of doubt and hesitation. You don't control every thought that enters your mind, but you do control which ones you nourish. Every time you dwell on what could go wrong, you give fear a little more space. It starts small. A what if, a hesitation, a pause, but with repetition, it becomes a pattern, and patterns become identity. Suddenly, you're not just experiencing fear, you're living through it. You're making decisions through it. You're letting it decide how big your life is allowed to be. But the same law applies in the opposite direction. When you feed faith, you strengthen courage. You start to see possibility where you used to see problems. You move based on vision instead of emotion. Faith doesn't mean ignoring reality. It means believing in a greater outcome beyond what your eyes can see. It means choosing to act even when the evidence hasn't caught up yet. It's building when the ground still looks empty. Walking when the path isn't clear. Trusting when the odds say quit. The world will always offer you something to fear. The headlines, the opinions, the circumstances, they all compete for your attention. But your attention is power. Where you place it decides what grows. If all you do is consume fear, worry, and negativity, don't be surprised when your confidence starts to decay. You're not broken, you're just starving the right part of you and overfeeding the wrong one. Faith isn't built by accident. It grows through practice, through discipline, through conscious repetition. Every time you show up when you don't feel like it, you feed faith. Every time you speak life over your goals, you feed faith. Every time you take one more step despite the fear shouting in your ear, you feed faith. And every time you shrink back, doubt yourself, or avoid the hard thing, you reinforce fear. The mind doesn't care what you feed it. It just grows what it's given. It will build arguments for fear just as easily as it will build reasons for faith. That's why awareness is everything. You have to become the gatekeeper of your inner world, the one who decides which thoughts get fed and which ones get starved. What you repeat, you reinforce. What you believe, you build. People wait to feel confident before they act, but confidence is the result of consistent feeding. You build it by moving through uncertainty over and over until your faith becomes stronger than your fear. The more you focus on growth, the more momentum you gain. And momentum turns into identity. You stop asking, can I, and start declaring, I will, not because the fear disappeared, but because your faith outgrew it. The choice is yours every day. Feed fear, and your vision shrinks. Feed faith, and your future expands. One leads to excuses, the other to execution. One builds hesitation, the other builds hunger. Whatever voice you feed the most becomes the loudest. And whatever becomes the loudest eventually becomes your reality. The inner critic doesn't need proof to speak. It just needs a pause. It shows up the moment you hesitate. The second you second guess. The instant you sit still long enough for doubt to gain a voice. It's not there to offer feedback, it's there to sabotage. It tells you you're not ready, not qualified, not good enough. And if you stop to argue, you've already lost ground. So, if you find yourself thinking what you should say, you've already lost ground. The answer is not conversation, it's motion. You don't outthink the critic, you outwork it. Every time you take action in the face of fear, you chip away at its power. Movement is louder than doubt. Discipline is louder than insecurity. Work ethic is louder than fear. The critic doesn't have a response for consistency. It can scream all at once, but if your feet keep moving, it becomes background noise. Waiting until you feel confident is how the inner critic wins. It feeds on delay, grows in indecision, and multiplies in comfort. But the moment you take action, real action, focused action, you silence it. You shift the energy from mental noise to physical progress. And progress doesn't give the critic space to breathe. Daring forward requires danger and fear. Moment one, the wind drops out. You silence it. You shift the energy from mental noise to physical progress and multiplies into physical progress. It doesn't matter how small the action is. A single step forward weakens the grip of the voice that tells you to stop. Relentless action doesn't mean perfect motion. It means persistent, purposeful motion. It means you build habits that drown out the doubt. You do it anyway. You show up anyway. You execute anyway. That's how you kill the noise. The inner critic doesn't live in reality. It lives in potential, in the gap between where you are and where you want to be. But the more you act, the smaller that gap becomes. And the smaller it gets, the quieter the voice becomes. Because now you're building facts to fight fiction. Now you're stacking proof against the lies. No one becomes great by negotiating with their weaknesses. They become great by building in the face of them. You can't wait until the voice disappears. You have to decide it won't lead. That critic may never fully go away, but it never has to win again. Not if your actions are louder than your excuses. The moment you start building momentum, you start changing identity. You stop identifying as someone who's stuck and start becoming someone who moves anyway. The critic loses control when the worker takes over. When action becomes your default response to doubt, you stop needing motivation. You start depending on mission. Relentless action is not just movement. It's rebellion. It's resistance against the part of you that wants to stay the same. It's how you silence the lies that say you'll never change. You don't wait for peace to move. You move until peace shows up. You don't ask the critic for permission. You prove it wrong through every step forward. Your environment is not neutral. It either builds you or breaks you. The people you surround yourself with, the spaces you occupy, the energy you absorb every day all shape the thoughts you think and the standards you set. You might have the right mindset, the right goals, and the right work ethic, but if your environment is toxic, your progress will always be under attack. You can't thrive in soil that keeps poisoning your roots. Toxic voices don't always shout. Sometimes they disguise themselves as friends, family, or familiar habits. They speak in subtle ways, planting seeds of doubt, envy, or limitation. One sarcastic comment, one negative conversation, one dismissive remark can echo in your head for days. Over time, those voices become internalized, and you start repeating them to yourself without even realizing it. Protecting your peace isn't selfish, it's survival. The spaces you spend time in reflect back what's possible. A chaotic room fuels a chaotic mind. A distracted atmosphere produces a distracted focus. If your environment doesn't inspire discipline, clarity, or ambition, it becomes harder to maintain those things on your own. You shouldn't have to fight your surroundings just to stay aligned with your goals. Set up systems and spaces that support the energy you want to live in. You absorb more than you think. The conversations you hear, the content you consume, the people you engage with, each one either elevates you or pulls you down. You're not just choosing where you are, you're choosing what you become. If you spend enough time around small minds, you'll start shrinking your dreams to fit their comfort zones. Your mind adapts to the energy it's exposed to most. Not everyone deserves access to your mental space. Just because someone has history with you doesn't mean they deserve a future in your life. Loyalty doesn't mean tolerating negativity. You have to be ruthless about your mental boundaries. That means saying no to energy that drains, distracts, or disrespects your growth. Every time you allow toxic energy to stay, you delay your evolution. Your environment should reflect your vision. Build spaces that speak to the future you want, not the past you're trying to escape. Put reminders of your goals where you can see them. Keep your space clean, focused, and intentional. Create routines that trigger focus and energy instead of stress and hesitation. Design your world to match your ambition. Sometimes the loudest breakthroughs happen when you get silent and step away from the noise. Silence reveals what the noise was hiding. A clean environment gives your mind room to breathe, space to think, and clarity to act. You don't always need to add more. You often need to subtract what no longer serves your direction. Less clutter, less noise, less distraction creates more room for power. You cannot create a powerful mindset in a powerless environment. Elevating your life requires elevating your surroundings. This includes your circle, your habits, your spaces, and your inputs. Growth is not just about what you do, it's about where you do it and who you do it around. Discipline is the foundation that transforms mindset from chaos into clarity. You can't wait for inspiration to change your thinking because emotions are inconsistent and unreliable. One day you feel unstoppable, the next you feel broken. And if your mindset depends on those feelings, you'll never gain real control. Structure brings consistency where emotion brings fluctuation. Discipline is what creates direction when motivation disappears. Most people try to change their life with emotion. They get hyped by a video, a quote, a temporary burst of belief, and then crash when the feeling fades. But mindset isn't built on moments of excitement, it's built on repeated action. It's not how loud you feel in 1 second that matters. It's how consistent you are over days, weeks, and months. Discipline becomes the system that sustains the vision long after the excitement dies. Structure builds identity. When you create habits and routines, you give your mind a track to run on. You no longer depend on willpower because you've built a framework that moves with or without emotion. You wake up and go, regardless of how you feel. You train, you study, you build, not because you feel like it, but because that's who you are. Discipline isn't restriction, it's freedom from inconsistency. The stories you tell yourself about who you are begin to change when you consistently show up for yourself. The old script says you're inconsistent, lazy, or lost. But discipline writes a new one. Word by word, rep by rep, step by step. Every time you act in alignment with your purpose, you add a sentence to a stronger story. Eventually, the lies can't survive because the evidence you've built speaks louder. Discipline turns intentions into results. Everyone wants to win, but few want to commit to the structure required to win. It's easy to dream big when you're emotional, but it's discipline that turns that dream into something real. Without structure, potential stays trapped in theory. With structure, it becomes execution. You don't become confident by wishing. You become confident by building evidence that you do hard things. Emotion tells you to wait until you feel ready. Discipline tells you to move because the clock is ticking. Emotion wants comfort and praise. Discipline wants progress and growth. Emotion looks for shortcuts. Discipline builds the road. And the more you lean into structure, the less power emotion has to derail your mission. When you train your mind to respond to structure, you stop falling for distractions. You start acting with intention. Your morning routine becomes a ritual of power. Your focus becomes unshakable. Your goals become non-negotiable. You stop relying on temporary feelings and start relying on daily execution. That shift changes everything about how you see yourself and what you believe is possible. Discipline is not about perfection, it's about priority. It's choosing consistency over chaos, execution over emotion, purpose over pleasure. When you live by discipline, you stop reacting to life and start creating it. That's how the script changes, not through hype or hope, but through habits that prove who you really are. Your words shape your reality long before your results catch up. When you speak victory to yourself, you're not lying, you're leading. You're telling your mind where to go, even when your circumstances haven't caught up yet. It might feel fake in the beginning because you're not used to speaking from a place of power, but just because it feels unnatural doesn't mean it's untrue. You're not affirming what you see. You've repeated fear, doubt, and limitation so often that it became familiar. Now it's time to repeat strength, purpose, and vision until that becomes your new normal. You can't just say it once and expect transformation. You have to speak it again and again until your subconscious starts to believe it. Every time you say, I will, you weaken the grip of I can't. It's not about pretending to be something you're not. It's about practicing who you're becoming. Winners talk like winners long before the world gives them a trophy. Leaders walk like leaders long before anyone hands them the title. You speak with conviction, not because you feel certain, but because you're choosing certainty. That choice builds a mental foundation strong enough to hold the future you're chasing. Most people wait to believe until they see results. But belief is the seed that creates the result. And that is when you see that creates you don't speak victory because you've already won. You speak it so that you can win. You're planting thoughts today that become outcomes tomorrow. That's how mindset works. Thoughts create words, words create actions, and actions create results. But it all starts with what you tell yourself when no one's listening. There will be days when speaking victory feels like a joke, when nothing is working, when everything feels slow, when your reflection doesn't look like a winner. You don't need to be your own worst enemy. You don't need to be your own worst enemy. It's time to say, I'm finished with this stuff. I'm done with it. It's time to say, I'm finished with what you do. You don't need to be your own worst enemy. Say it anyway. Declare strength when you feel weak. Declare growth when you feel stuck. Declare progress when you see none. That's not denial, that's discipline. That's what separates the committed from the casual. What you speak often, you start to expect. What you expect, you start to act on. And what you act on, you start to become. So speak life into your goals. Speak success into your grind. Speak vision into your process. Your words have the power to shift your identity one sentence at a time. But you have to stay consistent even when the mirror hasn't changed yet. Your inner dialogue sets the ceiling for your outer life. You can't outperform your own belief system. You can grind all day, but if you keep saying you're not enough, your results will eventually reflect that. But when you speak like someone who deserves to win, someone who's built for more, someone who refuses to quit, that energy starts to shape how you show up. Speaking victory is a habit of high performers. It's not about arrogance, it's about alignment. It's how you close the gap between where you are and where you're going. Every word you speak is a brick in the foundation of the future you're building. Even if it feels fake at first, keep building. Repetition builds belief, and belief builds the life you were meant to live.